Thank you so much, and a pleasure and privilege indeed to be here. I'm going to try and go through as fast as possible. If you need to fidget, please fidget. It won't in the least worry me. This is a vast area. Butterflies have massive significance, massive meaning, at different levels, in different ways, to different people, in different places, in different eras. But I'm going to begin in the beginning. Well, just to give a little announcement to say that late last August, one of those things flew over Richard Jefferies' grave in Worthing, in West Sussex. I didn't see it. I wasn't there. I'd been there a year before for the centenary of W.H. Hudson, of whom I'm a devotee. But anyway, a long-tailed blue did indeed flit over Jefferies' grave. My friend Neil Hugh, who lives close by, saw it, and then went on to find eggs on the patch of, this one there, on the patch of broad-leaved everlasting pea that grows just a few yards away from Jefferies' grave. Now that's significant because that was supposed to be one of our rarest migrants, if not vagrants. And the significance is that over the last decade or so, that butterfly has been colonising southeast England, particularly the Sussex, the East Sussex coast in particular, breeding mainly on broad-leaved everlasting pea. And Jefferies would welcome it home. So there's a lot of things happening in the world of butterfly here. Change for butterflies is the norm. That didn't work. Does that work? No. Where's the gadget? Is it returned? These. Well, I've tried that one, and I've tried that. And are we on slideshow? Yes. And we are on slideshow. Is it that? No. How is it? That. Oh, that did it. Done it. No. It's returned. What I'm offering today, folks, is offered under the premise of what we see, we feel, which is just a very short line of thought from W.H. Hudson, who's of course buried in the same cemetery on Brompton in Worthing as Richard Jefferies, and that's from Nature in Downloads, one of his best works, which he wrote in the very room in which Jefferies died, which is quite remarkable. And I think butterflies and our relationship of thinking about them really encapsulate that thought. What we see, we also feel very strongly indeed. I'm not going to say too much about the butterflies in English poetry. I have to confess I've done an immensely long study on this, and I could write a book on it if anyone really wanted me to. But my conclusion is that poets do not understand our butterflies big time. Masefield there did. And I quote him from his Gypsy King story poem, King Cole, and he describes butterflies as the souls of summer hours, and that would be spring and summer hours. He did understand that he collected them as well. In most modern poems about butterflies are actually humorous and flippant. There's two collections on British butterflies come out in the last few years, one from Bristol and one from Rothamsted, in fact, both by scientists. There's also a book called The Butterflies of Shropshire in Verse, which came out. Most of those poems are actually very humorous, very flippant. Can I just say one thing only, be didactic? Butterflies are not comic creatures. They are actually very determined, and the mates of most of our species are vicious thugs, and you would not want your sister, your daughter, to go out with a bloke with the morals of the butterfly. But anyway, there's just a thought from Masefield, I think really says something really quite important. Edward Thomas goes, who also collected butterflies when he was a boy, but not for very long, and then went rather off butterflies for the same reason as Hudson did. He abhorred butterfly collectors, and it was impossible in that era to separate butterflies from their collectors. And here's Edward Thomas from a poem called The Brook. She wrote in East Hampshire, which describes butterflies as the first of insects to have earth and sun together and to know their worth. Robert Frost, Thomas's friend, says something quite useful about them as well. So there's something massive here. Within and beyond poetry, but through the poetic eye, we see butterflies as being symbols of freedom, hope, joy, constancy, as they yet always reappear, and big time change. They are changelings. They are masters of change and exploiting opportunity. They are masters of transformation, and that is incredible thing, business of metamorphosis from egg to caterpillar through pupa, and that whole biological soup, the biological blender they go, biochemical blender they go through during the period of pupation, and the butterfly itself being the boring biologist to me would describe it as the mature reproductive stage of a complex metamorphosis. Yawn. It's also the main dispersal stage as well. Caterpillars can go far and wide too, but not to this extent, and not over the seas like the swallowtails and the long-tailed blues can do. There's also this business about beauty and wonder. We obsessed rightly by beauty and rightly by wonder, which is awe in the old picturesque movement and the romantic movement. And then if you add interest, if you add intrigue, the butterflies become very captivating. And anyone who is keen on coming out with hypotheses would love butterflies because they spawn a different hypothesis each day. And I can recommend his Disgrace, The Purple Emperor, has been particularly good at generating new hypotheses almost by the hour. They are very, very good at it. So there's something there for us as well. And obviously they inhabit, by and large, extremely special places. I'll say a bit more about this. And they occur within those places in ultra special moments of time. Most of our rarer butterflies are restricted to extremely the heartlands, the epicenters of our most treasured landscapes. When those places are at the zenith of their annual cycle of natural beauty, if you don't mind me being slightly rude about winter snows and autumn leaf falls, it is quite remarkable how they do that. And butterflies have ecstatic experiences. They are surprised by joy, they delight in joy, and they offer to us ecstatic experiences. I have the lowest boredom threshold in Brexit Britain, and it is absolutely flat on the floor. And I've never been bored butterflying. Now that's remarkable. But there's this whole issue of the extent to which they're metaphors of human existence. And I'm far from convinced that they actually are. Think caterpillar, think crawling around, think consuming, think changing skin, moving house, think moving around, and then pupating. And then what? But then we're going to fly. A little bit more, I'll come back to that later on as well. And then there's this whole issue of psyche, capital P, the Greek goddess of the human soul, and psyche with a small p, which in classical Greek is the Greek word for a butterfly. I only did 2 years of Greek, but at least I managed to learn that. And we got rather worked up about Psyche. There's a whole load of different pictures of her. That's an American picture. It's very it's like something out of Lolita, to be honest, a book I more than slightly struggled with. But in classical Greek mythology, they believed that when you were slain on the battlefields of Troy, or wherever it is you were slain, your soul would depart on the wings of a butterfly. And various other cultures have similar thinkings as well, the ancient Aztecs as well. And then it gets quite remarkable because as an add-on to that, there's the classical story of Eros and Psyche, who became a goddess, and became the goddess of the human soul. Hence, psychology, psychotherapy, and all the other things I desperately need. So a great deal has been spawned from this concept of the butterfly and this concept of the human soul and the linkage between them. By the way, if I was doing my A levels this summer, I've been wanting to go to university to study environmental psychology, because I think it is going to hold the keys. It is going to demonstrate our needs big time. It's starting to pay off. So Eros and Psyche, isn't she lovely? She'll come back into it later. There's an awful lot of on the Victorian obsession for collecting, of which butterflies were one of the most collectible treasures. This is, come on in, don't worry about anything. This is just a black and white picture of Hades. I think very disturbing picture called a painting called The Ruling Passion, for an ornithologist with all his children doting around. Well, I had 4 children, and they actually rather resented my passion for butterflies, but they did not resent the wonderful places their father's interest in butterflies took them, and the love they had for those places has flourished. Got there in the end. For decades, our relationship with butterflies was based on wanting to do this to them. During the bulk of the Victorian era and the Edwardian era, and really into the Great War and a little bit beyond, in this country, and indeed to some other countries, Germany in particular, people were obsessed with collecting butterflies, and they went to great lengths. This is Sir Vaughan Harper Crewe, 10th Baronet of Cork Abbey in South Derbyshire. Cork is run by the National Trust, and maintained as a stately home in serious crumbling decline. It's well worth visiting. When the Trust got it in 1985, after a long period of serious neglect, decided not to do it up and do a faithful restoration, but to leave it as an example of what happens. And dear Sir Vaughan, who I've studied really quite in some depth, he was an obsessive collector of taxidermy birds, in particular birds' eggs, butterflies, moths, and various other things, pebbles. His entire house was a museum, and it is listed as a museum now. He was seriously OCD, and he did need help. And yet his tenant farmers loved him. They needed to get special permission from him to trim a hedge, because he wanted his hedges suitable for the moths, the butterflies, and the nesting birds. What he think about the modern flail cutter would be unprintable. They would be banned from his estate, top man. I like Hornsey. And so little of his butterfly collections remains. Some white spotted silver wash fritillaries from the New Forest. in the 1890s. He had the habit of descending on the forest, it was called the New Forest, with his entourage, his gamekeepers, and the whole other, bagging a New Forest wood, or one of the enclosures, stationing flunkies at all the entrances to keep all the riffraff off, and then collecting all the butterflies and having a jolly good time. It generated a few rows and rumpuses, but he was in his own world. He was also a checkbook collector and competed with one of the Rothschilds in a big way for buying. And that era's gone. Our relationship with butterflies has changed massively. In those days, butterflies abounded. It's clear in the Victorian literature how profuse things like Silverwater Fritillaries there were in the New Forest during July. And it's clear that the butterfly collecting in this country is just simply no longer viable because the populations are just no longer there. We've moved on. But I have to confess, I really rather like Hornsey, but he did need psychological treatment, bless him. And butterfly collecting went on and on and on. That's Elgin Newman collecting outside Folkestone. There's a motorway going through there now. And a whole load of stuff to do with the Channel Tunnel and so on. And that down there is seriously scrubbed up. It's more a wood. This is particularly up my street. This is IRP Escot's 37.5 foot high net, which is developed from reconstructed of a Victorian contraption for catching perched specimens of purple emperors perching high up on trees. He didn't wave the net around in the air. He had to keep the bottom on the ground and push it at a perched specimen and let go. There were 96 specimens he took with that contraption in Bristol Museum, and there are some of them. One might ask why, but one of the jobs I've got to do is study highbrow fritillaries specimens in the old collections to try and work out how many different forms there were of highbrows. It's a critically endangered species, the one we're next going to lose, in fact, and try and work out what those museum specimens can tell us. With swallowtails from Wicken Fen, we know that as Wicken shrank and butterfly and the swallowtail population got more and more confined to Wicken, their thoracic wing muscles got weaker and weaker, and the specimen became smaller and smaller. These will tell us similar tales in time. That's where we've been. Butterflies have also, because of that, have been really strong in brand and marketing and advertising for a very, very long time. That's a late Victorian piece of advertising involving the Purple Emperor. She looks a bit like well, quite frankly, I think Jadis Queen of Charm, if you remember the White Witch of Narnia, might look a little bit like that. It's very, very strange, but butterflies are very powerful images in brand, in advertising, though in fashion wear, they're continuous in fashion wear, and it's also one of the top 10 body tattoos in Britain, from what I've managed to deduce from the tattoo industry's website. So I'm still working on that, but it's clearly very, very important. So Psyche is still in there working on body tattoos. I do not have a tattoo, but if I did, it would be the Purple Emperor, and it would be on my heart. But there's basically there's a metaphysical one there anyway. What's happened is that butterfly collecting is sadly and gladly and madly an aspect of our glorious past, a past which viewed nature as being something there for our pleasure. It has been replaced big time by butterfly photography, which is a very popular hobby, probably the second most popular wildlife hobby after birding, a long way after birding. And it gives you the thrill of the chase. It's, it's a hunting gene within us. In theory, you come away with some nice images and some fond memories, having worst put a foot in the wrong place by mistake and disturbed the old butterfly whilst it was laying an egg. But precious little damage, and more damage would be done perhaps by dog walking. But it is a really popular and relatively affordable hobby, and some places actually get taken over by it seasonally. That's nothing new. Butterfly collecting took over the New Forest for about 50 years. Brockenhurst and Lyndhurst in July were full of butterfly collectors, and it was a major local industry, board and lodging, food, guides, collectors, dealers, all that sort of stuff. Some places, Daneway Banks up in the Cotswolds, Large Blue site, during the Large Blue season, 3 weeks or so, that gets taken over. Bentley Woods, Purple Emperors down southeast of Salisbury, and a few others. It's starting to morph. There's a place called Hutchinson's Bank, Croydon, which has got introduced, but clandestinely introduced populations of 3 or 4 species long extinct to that region: Glanford Tillery, Marsh Tillery, Duke of Burgundy, black vein white, and large tortoiseshell, and is becoming a butterfly photographer's mecca. I more than slightly worry about it, because you can have the experience but miss the meaning, and this is modern butterfly collecting all over. Those are people photographing purple emperors, including my dear friend Gillian photographing an emperor feeding on a steaming mound of fresh horse manure. And indeed, I can name Shane Patrick Barkham. There we are, misbehaving. And something in the region of 2,000 to 3,000 people a year, day trips a year, taking place to Fermy Woods in Northamptonshire during the noughties, and between 2010 and really lockdown. That population's way down now, and a lot of people have moved to visiting against the emperors at Net Castle Estate, Net Wildland in West Sussex, which has been successfully running Purple Emperor tourism for the last 10 years. We run Purple Emperor safaris there. They're virtually full up, and it's not a cheap thing. But gosh, we're giving them some experience and some meaning. I do worry a bit about butterfly photography stopping short of where it could go. And here's my message to butterfly photography, really, rather than butterfly photographers, as it says there. The second verse, I think, of Teach Me My God and King, which was written just near Wilton in this county, Wiltshire, published in 1633. A man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or if he pleaseth through it pass, and then the heavenless spy. Well, Jefferies would like that. You try to put that into its natural world context. That's Jefferies all over. So I can say that here. Go beyond the collected image. Go into the meaning of the whole experience. Do not have the experience, but miss the meaning. And that's from Eliot, and a typical bit of Eliot, because he's buried that incredibly important line amongst a whole bit of waffle, basically. Wordsworth could do the same, actually. But it still is an incredible challenge to all of us, and including those of us who are, as we are, I'm sure, pilgrims in the world of nature. Butterfly science is massive these days globally, and butterflies are attracting the work of many of the world's greatest living biologists, conservation biologists, and there's so much happening in this country and various other European countries, particularly Netherlands and Catalonia as well. What you're looking at there is some people looking for mountain ringlet eggs up on the high fells. That is a mountain ringlet egg. And a lot of work was done, particularly by my friend John Hewson here and myself during the 90s. We came up with a hypothesis which suggested that mountain ringlets, which we thought were breeding on mat grass, Nardus stricta, which is the abundant grass over miles and miles of mountain tops, and yet the butterflies was very restricted. We couldn't quite work out why. John's a good botanist, a montane botanist, and eventually we realised that they were only had colonies where there was fescue grasses beneath the mat of mat grass, and came up with a hypothesis that the caterpillars, baby caterpillars, were actually starting to feed on fescue grass and then moving on to mat grass as they got bigger. And sure enough, that hypothesis has been proven to be right. Lancaster University has done some brilliant work both in laboratories and finding out the L1, the first instar caterpillars, need Festus rovina. Without it, they die. And a lot of it works out in the field as well. I told you that butterflies are good at generating hypotheses. We need to get better at that sort of hypotheses we developed. But that one actually worked, and I've handed it on. It's been a wonderful journey. And when I started on that butterfly in the very early 90s, next to nothing was known about it. We didn't even know where it was. It was that bad. But knowledge doesn't last long in the butterfly world, particularly in this era, because there's so much movement, so much change, ecological change, biological plasticity change is going on. Many of them associated with climate change and the pace of ecological change that's developing. During the 1970s, we believed that Adonis blues and silver-spotted skippers were very short-term, especially if you allowed the turf in their breeding areas to grow taller than 2 centimetres summer height, you'd lose those populations. And there was good science then suggesting that's the case. Well, the goalposts have moved considerably since then, and as such that they seem to be going up to at least 10 centimetres. This is partly the impact of climate change, or something called the larval niche. It's the larvae, the grow bag, the living grow bag phase. So important. So a lot of our knowledge was right at the time, but the time has changed. And it's the whole business is the importance of the larval niche. I've been working on caterpillars of the pearl border fritillary. There's one of them on the right there with canary yellow spines. They breed on violets, and I had that meditation of from Eliot's Ash Wednesday, who walked between the violet and the violet, who walked between the various ranks of varied green. Well, he wasn't actually writing about pearl border fritillary caterpillars, but he could and should have been. He's far more interesting. They come out to bask. There's one there. And then feeding on drying dead leaves, oak and bramble in particular, and wandering from violet clumps to violet clumps. Notice the absence of any violet flowers on those clumps. They've eaten them. That's a good way of finding fritillary caterpillars. Find violet clumps with no flowers, no buds, because they've been eaten, and then home in the pillar. It's really rather fun, but the really important ecological work doesn't need to be done so much on the butterflies as on the larvae, the larval niche, and it's tricksy. My purple emperors spend 10 blessed months as larvae. They may then live for 10 days as a butterfly, during which time they behave appallingly badly and smash things up. But it's those 10 larval months which are so important, that grow bag phase. So never underestimate a caterpillar, or the importance of a caterpillar, or the amount of ambition there is within a caterpillar. That's a purple emperor caterpillar just recently come out of hibernation. I named a whole lot this last winter after characters out of Narnia, which is not fun. So that's Jadis, Queen of Charn. I'm petrified of her. I remember the White Witch in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There she is. She's going to be an empress. Heaven help us. the bad news is Mr. Tumnus has just changed skin. He was stopped skin changing for 9 whole days due to poor weather. Caterpillars, the most important thing about them, ecologically, that's the vital growing phase of the metamorphosis. They are living grow bags. Turn the coin over, and if you want to know what ambition really looks like, look at a caterpillar. They have rampant ambition. World dominance in the case of the Purple Emperor. And they are changelings, remarkable things. That's a pale tussock moth caterpillar. Daylight, left, it's impressive enough. Look what it does under UV torchlight at night. Fluoresces. You can pick them up at 20 yards, 20 meters, with a decent UV torch at night. Purple Emperor pupae fluoresce strongly at night. We've only just discovered that. I wrote a whole book on purple emperors and didn't realise that that was the case. Bang, we've discovered them. We can study the pupal stage because they fluoresce at night. Something's crunching them. I don't know what it is. It may be the hazel dormouse. We're onto it. Trail cams are the answer. So caterpillars and changelings. I've mentioned a bit about emperors. One of the things I found in my book on them is that so-called knowledge on purple emperors was largely assumption and mythology. Oh, the power of assumption. Each one of us here could write a book on the power of assumption. And purple emperors ecology isn't static. They've moved the goalpost splendidly since I published the book in 2020. And this butterfly is doing more biological plasticity, ecological plasticity. One of the things it's done is moved into grey willow salix cineraria, cars. It's done it in the UK, and it's done it in the Netherlands, and it's done it in Germany, and it's done it in the last 15 years. Prior to that, there were no historic records whatsoever. Purple emperors in grey willow fens and cars, and they're now. Many facts in butterfly don't last long. Going back to Eliot and Ash Wednesday, because I know time is always time, place is always and only place. I wait for it, and what is actual only in one time and only for one place. I rejoice that things are as they are. What is actual only in one time and only in one place. That's massive. That's starting to kick in ecological science big time now. And this butterfly's success depends on its ability to exploit opportunity and navigate new problems, and new problems are all around it. What's it been faced? It's now invading London. It's becoming a suburban species like the brown hair streak. It's in most of the London parks. The hobby and the European hornet are major predators of adult purple emperors now. They weren't 20 years ago, they are now. Big problem with explosions of geometer moth larvae, winter moth, mottled umber, guys like little small moth like that, pushing purple emperors off its favoured sallows onto these so-called grey willows. It's got big problems with droughting off its sallow foliage, 2018, 2022. While White Admiral's been living with that honeysuckle drought for decades without moving it, the emperor's managing to do it now. And it's moving across huge areas of hostile landscape, both in the UK and the Netherlands, to farm new colonies and suitable pockets. Its mobility has increased. And it's going to be on the wing on the 1st of June 2024. The goalposts are moving that fast. The males use beauty as a weapon. That iridescence is for intra-male rivalry. It's not so much to woo the females as to blast rival males out of the sky with dazzling iridescence. You're looking at the biggest ego in the universe there, these iridescent males, morphos, and so on. Birdsong is also beauty to us. It is as a weapon. I dread to think what missile thrush song is translated into English, but it's not nice. Don't start it. It's written. And then it all begs the question of what on earth nature it is. And going back to Wordsworth, I've been working on translating this bit from Tintin Abbey into modern prose. There are some difficult words there for us. For I've learnt to look on nature, and I have felt a presence that disturbs me, the joy of elevated thought, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, emotion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from the green earth. That is incredible stuff, because it's our imaginations in there as well, in that definition. What have we got today? Biodiversity and the environment. Can you please get rid of those bloody words? There's also this whole business in our relationship with nature, and indeed within our relationship with butterflies, of home, places of belonging, heartlands. And the opening lines of Edward Thomas's poem Home Too, he wrote 3 poems called Home, really important. Often I've gone this way before, but now it seems I never could be and never had been anywhere else. 'Twas home. One nationality we had, I and the birds that sang. One memory, they welcomed me. I had come back. The rest of the poem does not matter. That hits the nail on the head, talking about rootedness, how we put roots down in these special places, our relationship with special places. Jefferies understood all this, and it's a poetic evocation of spirit of place in moments of time. Thomas was massive on this. It's also something about how memories, how places can collect memories, our memories, and keep them and retain them as their own. That's deep end stuff. That's the view from Edward Thomas's study, where he wrote many of his best poems over the Western Weald, Petersfield and Harting and the South Downs and beyond. It looks a completely wooded landscape. It's a lie. It looks wooded from there. From Leithhill Place, from Ralph Vaughan Williams's home near Leith Hill, it looks even more wooded. How he managed to leave that landscape with that love, with that relationship, with that rootedness, I just do not know. But places can chuck you out, and I don't know why. But anyway, there's a bit of Edward Thomas from the interpretation panel. But lo and behold, a couple of purple emperors behaving badly there as well. The Welsh understand all this far better than we do. They have this word Cynefin, which the plural is Cynefin earth, which translated means, well, we translate it as heartland, but it's really ecology, and it's one's personal relationship with place, which is geographic, cultural, historic, and family. My side of the mountain, my side of the wall, my part of the valley. There's also this issue of hiraeth, which I pronounce very badly, do forgive me, which is a homesickness, pull of a place. It can be a negative, like homesickness. And John Clare's so-called madness for the destruction of Helpston, his village, his heartland, by Enclosures Act and everything else. Or it can be a positive. It can be the positive side of things that call you back home. Jefferies would have understood this beautifully. It's keeping that coin sunny side up, flipping it over the whole time. I'll skip bro, but to us it's something to do with heartland, and we need to do a lot more work culturally in England about heartlands and rootedness. I must get on a bit. Nature connectedness, the role of environmental psychology, as I already mentioned, there's psyche and eros again, but the importance of, to our well-being, of our relationships with place, which can be a built environment, of course it can be natural environments, is fundamental, because we are hardwired to beauty, and it's a bit deeper than that. It's beauty and wonder, beauty and awe as well. And we do have a need for both heartland, and we do have Carnarvon. There's a little quote from Catherine Mansfield, gloriously out of date, but I did rather like her as a teenager. How hard it is to escape from places. However carefully one goes, they hold you. You leave little bits of yourself fluttering on fences, like rags and shreds of your very life. I've done that to all the places I've butterflied in throughout England and the British Isles and Europe for a very, very long time. And those little places, the bits you leave with your soul behind, the Jefferies would have understood this perfectly. They call you back, they're magnets, they're touchstones. So nature as a context then of our lives. Our lives take place within the natural world. And perhaps because we are part of nature, and because nature is an integral part of us. I mean, please note I've given nature a capital N. Can we join the campaign to give nature a capital N? Every time I write in the Times Nature Notebook, I use the word nature, I always give it a capital N, they always lowercase it, but I will continue to do so. I've been doing it for 10 years. We're in rather denial about all this as well. We're attracted so much by materialism, the material and acquisitive world. So we're in denial. Some of us, and Jefferies obviously leads us well on the way here, nature is a cathedral, a place of worship and more. And wildlife is just a key part of nature. But we tend to call it biodiversity and environment, which belittles it and is part of the denial, I fear. Back along, use the old Devon word, it used to be called creation. Sometimes I rather wish it still was. Long, long time ago, this is an old picture. A friend of mine were walking to the west end of Loch Arkaig, Chequered Skipper, butterfly country. And we realised if we went any further into Knoydart, we weren't going to come back. We'd found the still point of the turning world where the dance is. We chickened out. We should have gone. It was really fantastic. These are purple emperor butterflies behaving appallingly badly, smashing each other up around one of their so-called master trees, which is a Victorianism concept. They have focal trees, which act as territories, which they use generation after generation, where males establish dominance and wait for a female, need of male services to go up, but the females aren't that stupid and avoid the places like the plague. But at the still point of the turning world, there the dance is. And so many of our butterflies take us to, as I said, the heartland of our ultra special landscapes, when those places are at the zenith of their annual cycle of natural beauty. That's mountain ringlet country, high fells above Pawswater. And they can also take you into remarkable landscapes when the weather is transformed. And that's a picture of the early August heat shock of 2022 when I was out in those heat waves. I did the 40 Celsius plus. Well, someone had to go butterflying it. It was up to me. Yes, I did it. The brown butterflies stopped flying when they hid under bushes in the shade. The white butterflies carried on regardless, and the purple emperor carried on smashing things up. That's Terrell Downs in the early August heat wave. I don't mind saying that was a bit hot, but the memories from that venture linger long. They won't get altered by time or circumstance. I've been there. I had the experience, and I got the meaning. And special, I'll skip this because we're getting a bit on, but our butterflies' main heartlands are as important. These very special butterfly sites are as important as any grade 1 listed building which we create. The interesting thing about this one, Majesty is the owner, and this is Brian said, by the way, feels that his estate is bereft of butterflies and sadly lacking, and he's going to butterfly it. He's going to butterfly it. Top man, it's going to happen. He realised something special was missing, despite all that. This is Nep wildland, which was dairy and intensive arable until the early 2000s. and is being rewilded. You can feel those nightingales singing through that blackthorn scrub. And that's what's going on there now. And I love that line from In Memoriam from Tennyson: "For words like nature half reveal and half conceal the soul within." You know, constrained by words. Words never quite explain what we really mean, what we really feel, what we see, we feel. Hudson. I'm very, very near the end. This is my best friend of 60 years, Professor Fleming, professor of medical genetics at Harvard. That's right. And then at age about 50 something, he gave it up, decided to become an artist, is what he should have been doing in the first place. And he took, this is a huge thing, but he took that wonderful quote from Darwin: "The more I study nature, the more I become impressed. The contrivances and beautiful adaptations acquired through natural selection transcend in an incomparable degree those which the most fertile imagination of the most imaginative man could suggest with unlimited time and his disposal." Quote that. Decided that Dylan was saying exactly the same in his poem "The Force that through the green fuse drives the flower." I just love Dylan so much. And so they have the same thing in biological, in scientific prose, the same thing in poetic verse, and then Nigel produced it as a visual art as well. Yes, we need. And different ones of us, different times of our lives, respond differently to these different things. Missing from all this is him upstairs, and I've put him in very belatedly a quote from Francis of Assisi. Did not actually want to be called Saint Francis of Assisi, and the full quote is: "Only through Christ all things become our brother and our sister." You can change that to "Only through divine love all things become our brother and our sister." And this is Wordsworth. Sense sublime as something far more deeply interfused as well. And yes, this does happen. This is real. Some very tentative conclusions. I've overrun by a couple of minutes. There was and Jefferies would back me on this. There is a better reality than the material world we subsist within. And that is nature's reality. And then my big thing about butterflies is we're barking at the wrong tree. It's not the butterfly that is the symbol of human existence, but the caterpillar. The caterpillar is the truer metaphor for human existence. You can take pupation, click on that, and then we're going to fly. Mine is the sky. Lovely, bless you. Thank you so much. Questions, which I may